Hello,
And
Brian.
afternoon yet again, Brian.
Yes.
Hello, my friend.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
A little tired today.
hmm Yeah. So I was wondering, Brian, what you think is the way forward for us after this whole thing blows over? What do you
Holy
think?
Toledo.
hmm
Do you have a like specifics? Do you mean as a globe, as everybody, or as you and me,
I think
or
as an
um,
individual, but also as maybe not as big as the globe, but just as communities. Maybe just go as far as that.
uh,
Not worldwide, just locally.
yeah? There's going to be a fair amount of speculation. If that's fine, because that's really all I have right now is speculation. And are you asking once we get out of quarantine, everybody's out, and then what? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Where should we put our energy?
Wow, that's going to be the here's the speculation part is um, what's left standing, what's economy is going to matter, and depending on how long it takes and how many people are still have cash flow and still have a business, and that how much exchange there, how much trade there can actually be. And if there's a lot of trade and things are fairly close to normal of what we're used to, then we'll probably do something that's pretty close to normal. But if trade is not, if there is not a lot of affluence and if there's a lot of need and very little lubrication of finance to be able to start an economy, then I think we're not going to have any choice but to rely on our neighbors a lot more. That start thinking about neighborhood solutions, and there might be things might go like it could go a lot of different ways. One of the speculations is that obviously growing more of your own food, trading with neighbors, trading as much as possible. Somebody in the neighborhood having chickens, somebody in the neighborhood having other animals. Um, I think that's highly possible. The word that comes up for me is when Israel was first created, they got together and they did co-ops. What was the name? Kibbutzes, I think. Kibbutzniks, I think they were called. And there really was, there. I believe in capitalism, absolutely, and um, you know, to a point. There's, total capitalism is, doesn't make any sense. But kibbutzes or co-ops where people are actually banding together and taking care of themselves in groups really proved itself to be a great launching ground of creating an economy, creating exchange and flow. There's very few kibbutzes left in Israel. There's still some, but that was really how they got it off the ground, and that's really an amazing cooperation and working with each other is a really good idea within a capitalist system. I think is probably something that should be looked at. What are your thoughts about that?
Um, well, what I think where we should be going and preparing for is regardless of how the world is going to look and function after this thing is over. And there's also some kind of notion that there will be like a second wave as well. But anyway, be that as it may, I firmly believe that the natural way of life is not in cities, and that cities are actually they are death zones for individuality and industry. And paradoxically, people go to the city to find their fortune, and they're leaving the villages. And that's exactly what the British did when they came to India. They built the railway lines to make it easier for the people in the villages to come to the cities to seek their fortune. But actually, what happened is people just found misery and they found failure and they found cutthroat competition. But if you have a village based lifestyle, which means that You've got small settlements of people. They've done psychological studies showing that we are not don't have the capacity to actually intimately maintain more than a certain amount of relationships. I can't remember what the number was. It was 20 or 50 or 90 or something like that. But more than that, you can't keep up with having an intimate connection with more than a certain amount of people. So,
Mm.
and now if you're connecting to a lot of people, you're spreading yourself really thin. And we see in the cities, actually, people are completely disconnected. Um, people even, people don't even know what their neighbor's name is. I remember when I was in Stellenbosch University as a student, if I moved into a new place, the first thing I would do is I'd go knock on my neighbor's doors, like beside me,
Yeah.
and then also up and down. And and for a lot of people that was a really weird thing for them, but for me it was like I'm coming from a small town, which is not even a village, it's a town, but still, you walk down the street, and if you saw another person passing you, you don't know who they are, you greet them, you say hello, and how's you doing, and it's not like an impersonal thing. Anyway, so I think there's a lot that can be said about villages, which I would like to say. But in a nutshell, the combination of village life and capitalism means that I like that you said that capitalism is kind of a good system that can work, but total capitalism is bad. But what happens is when you have artificial scarcity, because people are putting their energy into producing resources they cannot eat, nuts and bolts and rubber and tubes and tires. You can't eat it. It actually doesn't have any value. And the growing food has been taken over by big corporations. It's
Mm.
being monopolized slowly but surely. And in that way, people have actually given up their wealth and their land, and now they're living in tiny apartment blocks, which is completely artificial way of life. And whereas before, you were growing food, so many people were growing food, and that means who's going to buy your food? So you have to charge at a cheap price, because that's the law of economics. It's like, but now I'm the only one selling food. You have to buy food from me. I can charge anything I want, and there's a high
Yeah.
demand. So in villages, basically, the demand of food was not so high because a lot of people were buying it, and the people that weren't growing food, they were offering some other services. They they were able to afford it easily by money or by bartering, because the food was not that expensive, because it was easily available everywhere. So in that way, it kind of puts a control valve on the capitalist, what's the word, um, ambition. So that's good. And then in addition to that, you also had a working class, a very happy working class people, and which
Mm.
means that the money of the people who are making money is being spent into increasing their industry and the agriculture and livestock and things like that, working with animals traditionally. Um, uh, and then the people who are the working class people, the money was spent on them to maintain them nicely as well. So these people did not have lack. And in that way, actually, all the necessities of life were taken care of, which is namely food, community, medicine, and housing, and which means protection. So in that way, you have everything you need. More than that, any need other than that is artificially created. So with the village, you can be satisfy all your needs, and then what happens is, now to maintain those needs does not require so much time and energy. So you have so much time and energy available to spend on the actual purpose of life, which is self-realization. Whereas in the Western society, it's purposely geared in such a way to rob you of all your time and energy that you don't have anything left for your own spiritual practice, for your pursuit of self-realization, which is what life is all about actually. If you even remember or figure out that that's what life is all about, because it's also meant to distract you from this point that life is actually about self-realization. All this industry and civilization and skyscrapers actually doesn't mean anything. It has no value, because um, it does not directly promote pursuance of self-realization, which in village life, everything is simple, everything is humble, people are real, and people help each other, they're connected. And the villages themselves are also connected, and it's such a beautiful life. So I think we need to start thinking in this way, and that this culture of villages, like you're talking about economy, A while ago, I was walking through, the rural areas here in India where I'm staying is already quite rural, but going through like the villages, and I'm seeing, a guy plowing his field with a bull. He's got this plow behind it, and he's standing on top of the plow while the bull is pulling it, two bulls, and he's plowing, like preparing the paddy fields. And I was just looking at that, and I'm thinking, this is real wealth. This is real wealth.
Mm.
When the economy crashes, your food at Pick and Pay is finished overnight. Your car,
Mm.
your petrol, sorry, it's just a hunk of metal. It's actually just a burden in your house because it's taking up valuable space. But this guy, he continues plowing his field and he continues getting his rice and vegetables, which this bull just needs some grass to maintain and somebody who knows how to keep it healthy if it gets sick. That's real economy.
Mm.
Real economy means having food, having grains, especially because grains is what gives you the strength so that you can work. If you don't have grains, rice, wheat, oats, barley, these things, you become physically weak and you can't work as much. So
Mm.
and with so much vigor. So in that way,
So
that's
let me,
economy. So we need to rethink our idea of economy, and we also need to rethink about what we actually need in life, and we should be prepared to simplify and just be okay with necessities.
so let me jump in. You started off with that. There's a belief of a second wave,
Yeah.
and yeah, and depending on, I do believe there's got to be a second wave ultimately, and depending on, like, there's a lot of depends on that one. Is that how high will that spike be? Some school of thought is that the cycle is on its way out in spite of the fact that there's going to be a second wave. There is some thought about, interestingly enough, a lot of 5G towers have been going up in Cape Town
Oh yeah.
during the quarantine. Yeah, the towers went up while we were in quarantine, and they're being switched on in Joburg, Cape Town, and Durban very shortly. So some people attribute the high frequency radiation to affecting people's immune system. And if there just happens coincidentally to be a very contagious virus at the same time, there could be a second wave that's much larger. If that's true, I mean, we'll know shortly. There isn't a lot of speculation over the time period is quite tight because we'll know soon enough. So I agree with that. And there's a continuum of where we're going to be on that continuum. And then you talked about the cities and that India, when the British came in and they put in the railroads, virtually to be able to dominate and move soldiers around and be able to move materials out of India, the things that they were taking and the things that they were bringing in. One of the other options is like creating a different economy, and that people started going to the cities. So and that's what happened with colonialism, and is still it's still happening today. There's more and more people moving to the city. So you don't know your neighbors. There's a lot more numbers of people in the city because we're not familiar with one another, that the morals and values change. I agree. I don't know my neighbors normally. And certainly in the neighborhood. And it was interesting. I was in the townships in Cape Town. Is that I was working. I worked in a lot of the different townships for NGOs when I first arrived, and driving through the townships on Wednesday at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock. It's vibrant. There's people walking around. There's people talking to each other. There was definitely a sense of community that I did not experience in my neighborhoods ever, which I found interesting. The village life, that there's an artificial life that gets created in the city, and that people, and you talk about that I think that there's going to be the one point that I really want to reiterate is when I was consulting in Vancouver, and working with some of the large multinationals and the people that were in power in those places at the level of partners and principals and lower, but that's the area I was working in one specific place I'm thinking about, and they were doing anywhere from 60 to 70 or plus hours a week of work. And it was
Oh,
expected. That was every week
oh, that's a lot.
and every month. And they had, like, I don't know how you have a relationship with your wife and your children, let alone spending the time with being able to have a relationship with self. I
Yeah.
really do think that is what's been robbed. That has been, that so much so that our attention is on not ourselves. What is valued is outside of ourselves. Position matters, power matters, how you look matters. Organizations are not authentic. They are as authentic as they can be, because it's unsafe to be who you are. If people are looking to dig holes under you and pretending that they're not, which is the culture of all of them, then it's not safe to actually be who you are, because you show people who you are and they can use that against you. So it's just really it's not the most genuine or fulfilling culture I've ever been in. And then you talk about the simple life, and that the man standing on the plow, and really being connected to the land, is that, we are so very disconnected from the land that we don't know. Most people don't know how to grow food. Most people don't know how to, can food. Most people wouldn't make a winter on their own. Of like, how do you prepare for that? And there's a real resilience in, like, my grandmother and father's generation, that they were close to the land and they did know how to do those things, and they were very resilient people. And that the convenience that's actually been handed to us, as in the last 50, 60 years, and several generations, is that there and also these like in the universities, where you have to give trigger alerts about topics, because people get so upset about what somebody is saying, or what a topic is, or that they're so easily incensed about things. All of that is pointing to, there's going to be a comeuppance one way or another, of that life is not going to be as cushy as that you're used to, no matter how we come out of this. And I do think it's going to be more about community, and that we can spread out from the cities. I think a lot of it's going to be because people can do things online. There's a lot of people working online, and there's a lifestyle where they get to live in beautiful countries like Thailand, for example, or India, and work on their computers to be able to make a living, which I think is, but that's happening regardless. We'll see how much of an electronic world, and how much we just go back to plowing the land. I think there's going to be a mix of things going on. So did any of that spark anything with you?
Yeah, there's a lot of fear, or maybe if you're not kind of affected by fear, but concern rather, I think is a better word to use, about certain manipulative tactics that governments and higher powers actually are using, with the notion of mandatory vaccinations and microchipping and these kind of things which are coming up. And like already, like in Australia, I've heard that, which is a very low incident of COVID-19 occurrences. But citizens have to download this COVID-19, this coronavirus tracking app on their phone. And if they don't do that, they're not allowed outside. Then you're like an illegal person, basically, if you don't have this app on your phone. So there's things like this, and then from there's not a long stretch of an imagination at all to think about, mandatory vaccinations. They were talking about, Bill Gates was saying that with your vaccine, you get this plaster that you put on, and underneath the plaster are these little needles made of sugar crystals. I've read of this many years ago, by the way. This is not even new. This has been already in the pipeline long years. And in that needle, in these sugar needles, the vaccines are in there. So you just put this plaster on your arm. It goes inside, it dissolves, and it leaves under your skin a UV or infrared or whatever kind of invisible tattoo, which can then be scanned to see if you have received this. Anyway, but now if you're growing your own food, then you can very easily say, sorry, I don't want it, get out of here. Because they can't actually force you to do it. But they can manipulate you by saying, well, we're not going to give you money. You're not going to have money to buy food with. So then you consent by saying, actually they force your consent in that way. But if you're growing your own
Yeah.
food, you can say like, get the hell out of here. And then they don't have any control over you in that sense. So
Mm.
I think it's a really intelligent way to go, where you're actually claiming your independence and claiming your free will by living on the land and with the land and in harmony with people and nature. And then, but I was also say that these kinds of attempts will not be successful if the purpose of these communities is not a spiritual one. If the purpose is just to avoid the government or these things, it will not work, because there will not be congruence. There will be differences in opinions and things of people in the community. But everybody, because everyone is different, everyone has different ideas. But there's one thing which is the same for everybody, and that's that we are all spiritual beings
Mm.
that exist eternally beyond the mind and the body. So that is fact for every single body. So if you connect there, that's one thing which actually everybody has in common. All the other things are all, in the realm of duality, and you cannot find one single principle that would be able to be common for everybody, except the spiritual one. So if the community is not based on that, then it will not work, unfortunately. But I think, but my actual point I wanted to make was that you're actually able to be able to withstand, these draconian measures that the people, the powers are making now to try and forcing people into their programs.
I, I just want to speak to the first one that you brought up, is chipping and vaccines. And I really don't think that's going to work. I think that there's way too many people that are thinking that this doesn't look like it's for our own good. And currently the situation doesn't seem to warrant the measures that they're suggesting that we have to do, just because they're a international global health organization. So the chipping and all of that is very interesting. I don't really see it happening, but there's been a lot of technology and a lot of talk about that for a long amount of time. And it's been at least a decade to 15 years, maybe longer, maybe even 1990s that I started hearing about that. So we're not surprised that we're here, but I just don't really see it working. And then you brought up, communities, and that I still think even spiritual people, it might be easier amongst a group of people that have a very rigorous discipline in their belief system, their spiritual belief system, like your community. And that there's a lot more that you have in common, and a lot more guiding principles that are already there waiting for you. And a high level of moral and value behavior. And I'm sure still it has its issues. I'm still sure that things come up between people. But the communities, most of the spiritual communities that I've seen pop up over the years, is that really being able to speak together. They're looking at creating a new society and a new way of interact with each other, because they reject how the normal society, for lack of a better word, how it functions. They're going, not that. And they get together and they say, we're going to do this and they're going to do that, and we're going to do these values. But what they haven't created is a new way of actually speaking to each other and understanding each other and making decisions together. They're still using debate and inference and perception, and they still have, they need a process to be able to work out their misperceptions and inferences, which means that the places that I get hurt by what I think that you're doing, and the shoulds, this is what we should be doing, as opposed to that it's a being able to come to, through dialogue and inquiry, people can come to decisions that work for everybody. That and most everybody, not always. There will always be a little bit, but you can get, in debate, it's generally either ors. And it's one person's view or a very small group of people against a very other small group of people, or several of them. And then a bunch of people that don't really care about that particular issue. So that's something that needs to be developed. The thing I'll point to, which I said to you the other day when we were talking about alpha behaviors, alpha male outdated? And, people, top-down thinking, and that we still are empowering alpha behaviors. And the one comment that I said to you outside of the recording was that the leaders of history were those that could sway the group to their way of thinking. And the leaders of the future will be the ones that can create the conditions where learning occurs. And I think that, so it's not about me and it's not about my thought process, it's my ability to bring people together through learning.
Yeah.
And then this brings me up another question is that the other day I saw, I don't think new, and I don't even know what it's called. But Elon Musk was having a conversation online about like an inch big electronics, I don't know what they call it, that you would actually make a hole in somebody's skull and place in this little gizmo. And before that, you would put these lines into the brain, electrical currents in the brain. And he was talking about it from people that were lacking function. They were going to be able to, through current, electrical current, stimulate parts of the brain so people had function in places they didn't have function before, which I found horrifying. Is that because, you know, I just really curious about, you know, he says the technology is getting really, really good. And so based on people that want us to get into line tracking that we don't need and get a chip that, you know, we probably don't want, it's not for my benefit, is the same group of people getting hold of, because there will always be, if you can say, okay, we can improve you by the means of technology, and that you can run faster, jump farther, and all we need to do is put these two wire things in your legs and some steel femurs, etc. There will be people that get in that lineup. How do you feel about all of that? Like I always saw it as like pipe dreams. I just really didn't. And then I heard him talking about it, which was this week. My ears perked up significantly.
Well, I think that it's a waste of energy. What's the point in that anyway? Because it's not encouraging and assisting you to pursue the purpose of life, which is self-realization. So all of these things just distract you more from that, and they don't help you towards that. It just increases the notion that you're this mortal body that will die when the body dies. It just increases that. So it's just like thicker and thicker illusion that's being sprayed on people's consciousness. That's all. I'm not at all impressed with this kind of technology. It's not impressive. It doesn't impress me. I don't even think.
No, I'm not impressed at all.
Oh.
I'm more asking about, do you think that if that did get presented to society as an option, like we have cosmetic surgeries today where people are changing their physical appearance artificially. And if people have an opportunity, and that's surgery.
Yeah, there will definitely be people who will want it, and then there'll also be definitely people who are opposed to it and who don't want it. There's definitely will be that.
Any conjecture about the people that will get in the line saying, I want to be physically enhanced by robotics and electronics? Any guesses to what direction that would go?
What direction that would go?
For the individuals who chose it.
Yeah, I mean, how you can foresee the type of complications that it can create, that it can cause. That you have these things in your body and then that chip malfunctions and now you've got all this heavy metal in your body, what you can do then. I mean, there's so many things that you can think of that could go wrong and possible side effects and stuff. And even if they did perfect it and there were no such things and they thought it properly through and they perfected the science, that technology, then you'd have people basically becoming addicted to augmenting themselves. And there's like a number of movies and games set in like a steampunk kind of era, it'll look like that.
Yes. I like what you said is that even if they perfected it, and that made me think of like breast augmentation. And remember their first attempts of that, and that, you know, what women were actually dealing with a decade later and 2 decades later, and all the mistakes that they had made. That now there's still complications with a lot of them. There's TV shows about them. but yeah, I'd have to get, even if they got it right, it would be the wrong direction. You're still about
Yeah.
your body and physical ability, and
It's madness.
yeah, I think it'd be a bad road.
It's madness. It's madness. Yeah.
Okay, so what else you got on your mind? So when we're looking at the landscape of what's going forward, is there anything else that you would add to that interests you, a topic that you would like to put out there and explore?
I think we're at 30 minutes now, so I think we're kind of towards the end.
This will be the last
I
one.
think the main thing which I would say, which I've been thinking about a lot over the years, but especially now, is just is village life and farm-based food growing communities. This is, I think, the only thing in terms of what to practically do on this planet right now. That's what I'm thinking. In terms of spirituality and stuff, that's like your individual thing. But this is a fact. Like practically, you need to get your own food because things are not. You're not going to get your food the way you used to before, and they can use that to control you. So so if you know how to grow food,
Yeah.
that means that you know you're actually more smarter than most people. Not if you're
Very
like
true.
a lawyer. Or,
My last comment is that I feel very, I don't think we're there by any stretch of the imagination quite yet, but I do think that this is an awakening of mankind. I do think that that life is going to change significantly. I
yeah,
do think that we're going to be able to change society towards what works for the people. We're going to start somewhere and we're going to move, kind of an experiment as society has been, towards making it work for people. Like right now, society does not work for the people. It's actually designed to have us be in fear, to have us be poor, to have us be working way longer hours than we should be, and desiring things that really are unimportant. And I really do see that that's going to change. That already is changing, and that what's happening now is the peak moment, is the place that it's going to be addressed, and that human beings learn in crises. When we're forced to actually look at things is when we do. And I think that time is now. And I'm very positive about and the possibility of what's happening for us as a society and a species. So I feel quite good about that, in
right.
spite of everything.
Yeah, I think
So,
something good will come out
any
of
last
it.
words?
I think something good will come out of all of this at the end of the day.
I agree. All right, Briat. Once again, well, that was fun. I enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. See you next time.
Love and light, my friend.
Arrivo.